Hi, everybody. I'm surprised I was invited. Hi, Lauren. I didn't say hi. I know quite a few people here, which is, I guess, odd. A plug for Raymond. They've been doing my taxes for 11 or 12 years, maybe longer, and I haven't been audited yet. No relations here. By the way, those of you who are entrepreneurs raising money, you know, Donald Trump, I'm not being political, said he felt like he was worth $10 billion. Remember that? Every entrepreneur raising money, you should feel like you're worth a lot more than people are willing to invest in you. 10 billion is a little bit over the top. Today I'm going to talk about investing in startups. This is something that you need to be able to deal with fear. You need to have a lot of patience. And you obviously need a lot of luck. Okay, things that are really things that you don't control. Fear is something you actually don't control. Patience, most people in America don't have patience. When you move in from another country, you had patience, now you lost it. And you know, luck is in really the hands of the creator. You know, even if you're religious or not, luck is not something anybody really control. So let's talk about how I got to be an entrepreneur. This is going to be a very non-traditional presentation, so please indulge me. Okay, the history of my family of being entrepreneurs. This is not actually my grandfather, but my grandfather looked just like that. Okay? Pretty much, there's probably 1 million people in Eastern Europe look just like that. Okay, this is a very common mugshot. So this is really, you see, 1918 Kalushin, Poland. That's a village where my family came from. It's a shtetl. It means basically it's a Jewish little town where most people who actually lived there died in the Holocaust. My family included, unfortunately, including my grandfather. He was a tailor. Very, very stereotypical. And he made Jewish prayer shawls, which are called talis, okay? It's what Jews wear when they pray, except on the weekends we don't. Actually, maybe only on the weekends. I never went to school. I don't know. Anyway, I did have a bar mitzvah, so at one time I wore a prayer shawl. Anyway, he made it in this building right there, which was destroyed in 1939 when the Germans occupied Poland, Eastern Poland. Anyway, he was an entrepreneur. He got paid by how many pieces he made. He was an independent contractor. There was no benefits. There was no health insurance, and frankly, if it didn't work, he didn't get paid. Very poor, very typical for that era. Then, after that, my father escaped from the ghetto and made it to Russia, the Soviet Union at that time. And by the way, we don't know that part of history. The reason I'm alive, because the Soviet Union, unlike our country, opened their doors to Jewish refugees. So my father was able to get away, run away from the ghetto, ended up in the Soviet Union. Of course, he got in trouble right away, and he ended up in the Gulag in Siberia. So this is not a picture of my father, but I bet he looked just like that. Okay? And this is how they line up to go to work. Okay? Not a great job, really lousy benefits, but the food was free when there was food. However, my father realized at that time he doesn't work for anybody, he wants to work for himself. That was when he realized, he had a eureka moment. He needs to work for himself. He doesn't want to be employed, whether it's a slave labor or for a fee. He wanted to work for himself. Fast forward, he makes it to Israel, you know, fights in the War of Independence, and eventually he decides to be a bus driver, and he goes to work for a company that was actually a cooperative. That means when you drove the bus, you were a member of a cooperative, you own part of the business. So the first entrepreneur in my family after my grandfather that made talis by the piece was my father, who drove a bus, and he owns a piece of the bus. He had a partner, so he owns the back half and his partner owns the front half. Anyway, that's what he did until he retired. He owned his own business, and that was that bus. Well, I ended up somehow at the University of Michigan, early 80s. I got married, I moved to America. I became an American citizen, and I married into a family of entrepreneurs. My mother-in-law, Florine Mark, who founded Weight Watchers in Michigan back in 1966, her family was a family of immigrants. And they came through Thunder Bay, Ontario. I think it was called Port something before they got the official name. And of course, you can see this grocery store. Every grocery store in 1921 in Ontario just looked just like that. That is not actually the family. Eventually, I have one of the real pictures in my dining room, but it's connected. I couldn't really. So this is really a typical Jewish-owned grocery store in Thunder Bay, Ontario in 1921. Later, they moved to Detroit. originally they were going to come to Detroit, but the ship stopped in Thunder Bay, Ontario. So they spent a few years there and eventually came to Detroit. So this is Dexter Davidson. Lauren knows exactly what it stands for. This is really an iconic store, grocery store in Detroit, owned by immigrants. That was the ultimate entrepreneurship to own a grocery store. You were retail, you had to order inventory, you had to make money on the margins, and you gave people credit, and they paid you at the end of the month when they get paid. It's the ultimate immigrant experience. Today we call them party stores, but that's how it started. My mother-in-law grew up really a child of immigrants in Dexter Davidson. That's where she grew up, in Detroit, which is really 2 streets called Dexter Davidson. And in 1966, she was overweight. She was looking for a way to lose weight. She heard that Jean Neidish, also a daughter of immigrants, started Weight Watchers in New York City. That happened in 1962. And right away they called it Weight Watchers International. Although they only had one Weight Watchers meeting in Brooklyn. They called it I mean, that was vision, right? My mother-in-law, Florine, bought the franchise in 1966 for Southeast Michigan and really Essex County, Ontario, which is Windsor. And went on to develop an empire that we basically built with. I joined the business, it was, I think, 1991. We went through a bunch of acquisition. At the end of the process, we owned Weight Watchers in about 14 states, in Mexico, and big parts of Canada. We had a big exit in 2004. We kept our business in Michigan and in Canada, but we sold all of our other areas to the parent company. And that gave me some money to lose by investing in startups, which is what I'm here to tell you today. So my day job is still running Weight Watchers. That's what I do day in, day out. However, in the evenings and on weekends, I lose money. Now, Weight Watchers is a very interesting business. It is not a brick and mortar business. It is in a way, but it's really a group business, very similar to the coding school. We have one Weight Watchers leader, who is a woman, mostly, some men, who've lost weight on the program. He are lifetime members. And they help other people, just like themselves, lose weight. It's a group support business. We have an amazingly healthy diet, which we develop in a very scientific way. And we motivate people to get control over their eating behaviors and adapt a healthy lifestyle. It's the best way to lose weight, and I'm saying it not just because I work in the business, it's my business, I say it because it is. We help millions of people a week all over the world to do this. And it all depends on the human connection. It depends on connecting to other people who have the same problem. Now, something called the internet, which Al Gore invented in 1967, shows up. And by the way, Al Gore did not go to Weight Watchers. If you haven't noticed, he's gained some weight. Now, we had to go through a whole transition from the physical to the online. And I'm proud to say that the largest online service of any kind that educate people about their life and their health is Weight Watchers. There are millions of people every week that sign up on our online platform. Yet, the physical world, the Weight Watchers meeting, is still part of that process. So we meld the two of them together. It took a while to get it done correctly. As Chris knows, it's not an easy thing to do, to transition to the new economy. So what we have is a legacy business based on Weight Watchers meetings, combining with the healthy eating, motivation, inspiration, and the online tools. It's work in progress, because you always have to change and innovate, but essentially that is the challenge of every business today. Whether you're a retailer, whether you have a fruit stand, you need to find a way to connect the online with the physical, and that transition is becoming very, very difficult for some businesses. Everybody talk about the death of retail. I think it's premature. If you have to buy a piece of meat, you have to go to the butcher. Okay, there are certain things that you cannot buy online. There are certain things you don't want to buy online. But there are certain things where you have the option, you can meld them together. I think Weight Watchers is a very good case study in that. Let's fast forward. So I got some money, and I started investing. Simple, right? Israel is the startup nation. Every conceivable startup starts there between Mondays and Fridays. Saturdays, people are off. They don't start businesses, but during the week, they do. Now, what's unique about Israel? It's a science-based economy. People go to school to study engineering and science, but they also study to be an entrepreneur, kind of what this place is trying to do. In Israel, when you go to study science or engineering, you also study to become your own boss, to become an entrepreneur, to do a startup. It doesn't always work out, but that's part of the ecosystem of the Israeli educational system. It starts early on, but that's the way it really allowed the country to become very, very competitive in technology, because we don't produce stuff in Israel. It's a small country. We produce ideas and knowledge. We do not produce products. We produce products in other countries, but the technology comes from Israel. Now, my first investment was, of course, in a medical company out of Israel called Smart Biotech. This company no longer exists. They did have an amazing investment, amazing technology. They can predict if somebody has AIDS much earlier than any test on the market by testing a few droplets of blood, which is really important for developing country where there's a lot of problems with contamination of blood banks. China, Russia, countries in Africa, countries in South America, where the blood bank system is not very developed, had a lot of issues with contamination. That technology can also be used to develop other tests for other diseases. One problem with this company was not the science, it was the guy who ran it. He had no clue how to run a company. He wanted to make the product in Israel. He wanted to make the tubes with the syringe that went in Israel. Bad idea. He could not get through the idea that this is not about making the tubes. It's about finding a partner who can get this into the American healthcare system. And after 12 years and millions of dollars, the company shut down. Why? Because the people who ran it did not know how to bring it to market. The science was impeccable. So, of course, I'm a very smart guy. I've had a nice exit. I also got involved in selling events for tickets all over the world. As you know, in many European countries, people travel extensively. Americans actually don't travel so much. Why? We have a big country. We can drive for 19 hours, and go to a diner on the other side of the country. In Europe, in Israel, you have to travel to another country, because if you travel for 4 hours, you get to a border. So people travel. And if you want to see, I don't know, Ziggy Marley in London, it's a very short flight from Tel Aviv. So a friend of mine introduced me to two really smart guys who had actually a degree from the Technion, the MIT of Israel, in business and marketing. They do have a program for that. It's an MBA. And they started the first Israeli company that sold event tickets all over the globe and for really unique type of travel opportunities to travel agents in Israel. Because until 3 years ago, most travelers in Israel was done through travel agents, which we don't have those. I don't think we have any more travel agents in America. In Israel, until 2 years ago, we had them. Now they're all in the museum. So, of course, my luck, the company was great, but they forgot that when the internet was invented, the need for the company is not going to increase, it's going to decline. Sure enough, we were the leaders. 4 or 5 years into it, we basically had to shut down the business, sell our technology to a large travel company that has a huge website for travel in Europe. It's in different languages. Interesting investment, but again, the internet killed that business, and we did not adapt fast enough. When you invest, when you start a business, you have to change. You have to change all the time, because if things change in the world, if you don't change, you die. I've learned that the hard way. Okay, my biggest investment today, HBR Labs. A leader in the world in co-browsing, sharing documents, screen sharing, video chat. What's unique about this company is that finally it has a market. It's a financial business. Banks need to verify the identity of users. Banks in many countries now, especially in Latin America, use the internet to open account, to collaborate with the banker and the client so they can sign things, and when they open the account, finally there's a market. Unfortunately, after 10 years as a startup, it's very difficult to raise more money, okay? That's a very old startup. And what happened with this company is that we're now trying for the last time to raise more money. This is my largest investment today. The technology is good. The guy who started it has the vision. He's not a coder, great team, very difficult market. Have you ever tried to do business with Citibank or with JP Morgan or with Comerica? Very tough. Banks are very conservative, they're risk averse, and more importantly, the decision making and the sales cycle, very, very long. So if you're going to sell to large companies or to government, huge obstacle. You can have the best idea, but it's a really difficult client. I learned that the hard way. This taught me a lot about business. I'm still the chairman of this company. I don't know what's going to happen. We just restructured it recently. But if this takes off, it can be huge. We're now actually on the cusp of really making it big. We might not be able to get the funding. Okay, let's talk about some successes. That's a client of Chris. Client of Chris. Fireball. This literally started in a garage, or as my partner from England says, garage, from France. Anyway, in a garage in Ann Arbor, creating edge-lit displays using LEDs. This happened probably 13 years ago when nobody knew anything about LEDs. We had two guys, one a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, Brian, and some other guy who was the inventor, which is no longer with us. I was their first funder. I'm now the founder, you can call me that. We are a leader in using LEDs to illuminate signs, internal and external, for all the leading brands of the world. This is a fairly big success. The company is going to do maybe $25 million this year. We're international. We have an office in the UK. We have a software company which we bought in Canada. We provide a lot of digital and online solutions. We also have an online platform to large brands to connect with them at the retail level. Remember what I said about the internet? Retailers have a huge disadvantage. When you go buy something at a retail store, they don't know who you are. They don't know you're there. And frankly, in very many cases, they take your money, but they don't really put you into a real database where they can market to you. We have a whole platform to solve that. So when you go into a location that uses one of our systems, we can tell the brand who was there, because the retailers are not that sophisticated, but brand wants to know so they can connect with the end customer. And the entire reason for this company to exist is to connect brands with end consumers at the retail level. A huge, huge obstacle, but brands need that, because otherwise, who's going to eat their lunch? Amazon, right? So that's what we do. We provide brand solutions to connect to clients and to promote to them at the time when they want to make a purchase. Give you a simple example. We have a device, a little screen, looks like a Kindle, and you approach a cooler at a convenience store, and all of a sudden it notices that you're there and it plays you a commercial for one of the products in the cooler at the time when you're ready with your purse or with your wallet to buy beer or wine. So that video that plays a commercial at the time when you purchase something increases the likelihood of selling you something by 5 to 10%. Big, big, big. So we have solutions for brands to allow customers to be attracted to their product, and every market could be a different product, and that content can be remotely pushed into the device. That's pretty good investment, and it's going very well, and we are leaders. Okay, if anybody's done drunk driving recently and got arrested by a police officer? You don't have to raise your hand. Secret is safe. So, you know, drunk driving in America is a growth industry. Okay? 2 reasons. People don't understand consequences, and people don't understand responsibility. This is not a matter of drug or alcohol abuse. It's the fact that we Americans have developed a culture of not understanding the kinds of consequences. It applies to everything that we do, not staying in school, not staying in marriages, not really having a sense of commitment to a lot of things that we start. That is a cultural dilemma for us Americans, because I'm also an American, and I can tell you, it's very difficult for Americans to stick to stuff. Weight Watchers deal with this every day. 2/3 of the customers that come to lose weight with Weight Watchers are people that if they had the discipline and they had the self-awareness, they would not have that problem. People with discipline and self-awareness are usually not overweight and don't get caught by the police for drinking and driving. Because most cases of drunk drivers are people who do other silly stuff like retail theft or having domestic violence, God forbid, or people who are decent people just like us, middle-class people just like us. Some of them are very educated. They don't have the self-control. So we teach that to the courts. So this is a company that uses behavioral science to teach court-appointed offenders to avoid jail, because it's a good time when the judge says you go to school or you go to jail, guess what people choose, right? But we do have a very, very scientifically based system, and now we're using the internet to expand our reach to provide that education using the web, okay? This is very unusual because most companies that do this stuff are kind of sleazy. We are not. We are medically based. We have master degreed counselors, and we see an opening here because we think that doing it the right way, in a scientific base, and doing it in an ethical way, and really provide a complete loop of feedback to the courts and a follow-up on the client has a real promise. And it's very scalable nationwide because courts don't have the resources to do this themselves. Last things I invested recently, it's a real estate thing. It's called multi-family housing, apartment complexes. Two partners and me are buying modest apartment complexes in the Midwest. Give you an example, as an entrepreneur, we saw an opportunity. Why? First of all, in the last 25 years in the Midwest, no modestly priced housing has been built. It's too expensive, you cannot afford it. If you buy an apartment for $40,000 or $50,000, to build it today will cost $100,000. You cannot replace. So if you go down on Washington Road and you see an apartment complex in Pittsville Township, the cost of building it today will cost twice what it's going to cost to buy that building today. So the opportunity to own an inventory of apartments in the Midwest that would provide one bedrooms at $700 and two bedrooms at $850 and a townhouse at $900 or $1,000, you can only do it if you buy existing stock. You cannot build for that price point. Why is that important? Because people who invest in real estate who are mostly non-American today, from China, from Europe, from Israel, do most of their investments in the East Coast and the West Coast, where the prices are very high and are based on the idea of buying art. If you buy a Van Gogh, or if you buy any other piece of art, you're a fool because you have to find a bigger fool who will buy it from you. Okay? So if you buy an apartment at a cap rate of 4 or 3, which means you're hoping that another fool will come and think it's worth more and will buy it from you. We buy properties that cash flow and provide a 10% return to investor, and most of the money comes from overseas. Because 10% return consecutively, predictably in an asset that even if it's not appreciating, would provide a great asset for a long-term basis. And I think that's the way to invest in real estate. I believe in Midwestern values when it comes to making investment. It's not about a quick return, it's about long, steady predictability and something that we think is quite recession-proof. So we have about 1,200 units. We've done it in the last 10 months. We're in the process of buying about 800 more in the next couple of weeks, couple of deals. Most of the money comes from overseas, but some of it is from America. We see an opportunity. I never planned on being in real estate. We thought this would be a good niche. An example of how I think. You know, I'm probably going to lose focus in the next year or two. So let's talk about what do I do besides investing. The most important thing that I do is work for my community, because we are as good as our community. America has become a land where we really preach for our kids to become entrepreneur and have a quick exit. The idea that you're going to be in a business for 20 or 25 years, learn from your mistake and make a modest living and eventually maybe have a good pay no longer exists. We actually have this idea that you're going to get into something and in 3 years Google's going to buy you for half a billion dollars. That's not realistic for most people. And frankly, that's not the American dream. The American dream is to build communities that are sustainable, that are successful, and are real communities where we can grow, we can develop, and we have a great family. And that's why I spend a lot of my time investing in my community. I work with Forgotten Harvest, Detroit Public TV, and many other boards. As an entrepreneur, the best thing you can do as an entrepreneur, besides starting a business or investing in the business, invest in your community. Because if you've been to South America, if you've been to Latin America, there's a lot of wealth. You notice most wealthy people in Latin America live in gated community. There's a reason for that, because as soon as you step out, there's crime, it's unsafe, and it's not a place you're going to let your kids walk down the street. We need to make sure that America is not a gated community country. We need to be able to have the kind of security, lifestyle, and the kind of sharing of values that we as Americans always thought we can depend on. And that's why as an entrepreneur, you need to lead. You need to show commitment to community. You need to invest in companies that have other people that share your values. And I really am a big believer in investing in people who have those values. Lastly, what have I learned in the last 13 years? Okay, to invest and to be successful, you need to have hope, you have to be optimistic, and you have to exercise some prudence. But if without hope and optimism, you should never get into startups or any business. Okay? The worst thing you can do as a businessman is to get into business if you're a pessimistic, nervous person. Okay? Okay? Don't do that. It's not going to work out. Bad choice. Okay, you have to understand what you're investing in. If you're an investor and after the first page you don't understand the business, don't invest in it. Any deck that it takes more than 2 or 3 pages to understand what the heck you're going to invest in, don't invest in it. And if you're a startup person or if you're starting a business and you need to explain it to yourself in more than 1 page, you're in the wrong business. Okay? You have to understand things that are complicated usually don't work out. Now, I'm not talking about science so much. I'm not talking about medical devices. I'm talking about the business part, the human connection part. Next part. Get involved in things that you can add value beyond money. Whether you're a founder or an investor, if all you're going to do is put your money and hope for the best, just invest in the stock market. It's much easier, much more predictable. If you can't add value beyond just investing, the stock market is a much better choice for you. Can you work with the founders and the owners? And who are your partners are going to be? I can tell you, and Lauren can tell you that. Businesses don't fail necessarily because of business ideas. They fail because of people problems. People problems are responsible for most business failures. You can ask Chris, you can ask the lawyers who are doing business consulting in the room. Most problems are not business problems, they're people problems. And if you bet on the wrong horse in terms of the person, or it's something you can't get along with if you start a business with your neighbor or your friend, don't do that, because it never works out. People problems usually don't get resolved. They don't get resolved because if people have big egos and they can't work together, the business suffers. And if you invest in a person that you don't like, who doesn't share your values, don't do that. Bad idea. I've learned that. Everything becomes personal. Kind of what I said before. Everything in business becomes personal. It's not business, it's personal. Egos and feelings are what makes people succeed and fail. If you think otherwise, you're wrong. I've lived 60 years and I can tell you everything is personal. Okay, you have to like what the company does. If you invest in something because you think they're going to make a lot of money, but you don't really care for that, don't invest in it. You have to like the niche or what the company is going to do. Because if you don't invest in a startup you don't understand or you don't really appreciate. Okay, you have to embrace change. If you start a business or invest in the business, you have to expect that the business will be in a different category or do something totally different after a year. Most startups don't stay in the same thing they had originally planned to do. Because things that they plan on doing is not usually what they're going to do a year or 2 down the road. If they don't change, usually they fail. Because especially with technology, it changes so quickly. Okay, it takes a lot more time and more money than anybody ever told you it's going to take. So whatever projections you see, you saw some of the projections before, 27 billion people, or whatever it is, those things are not that meaningful because at the end of the day, it's all a guess. I've done, and Lauren has done a lot of businesses, and it's always going to cost 5 times more, it takes 6 times longer, if you're lucky. So it's never, the business plan never gets executed the way they show it to you when you invest initially. Okay, key learnings. You have to learn when to say no and when to grab the opportunity. Because the best deals you're going to make are the deals that you didn't invest in. Okay? The deals that you invest in are deals where you can actually grab an opportunity. It involves risk, fear, and it involves a lot of nervousness. But if you really believe in the product or the service or the company, and you think there's an opportunity that would not exist if you wait longer, grab it. But you have to be very careful because if you don't think you're going to want to be involved in this long term, you have to say no. And by the way, the most important thing, owning and operating a successful business is really, really hard. Really, really hard. Forget all the stuff you see on TV, people hanging out at Starbucks with a laptop and they talk about the business, okay? And they show overheads and the team is talking and they're smart boards. It's BS, it's not true. When you have to make payroll, okay, when you have to pay your taxes, there's nothing glamorous about it. It's drudgery, it's tough. To succeed in business is something that's humanly very, very challenging. And what I said before really stands for why business is not a precise science. Forget the best presentations in business plan. There's nothing farther from science than business. Science is based on rules. science and based on vigorous research of things that happened in the past, and it requires tremendous amount of discipline, to execute and to discover. Business is based on people. People are as far from predictability, okay, are as far from science as you can be. Human behavior is something that I still don't understand. And frankly, anybody who says they understand it, they're fooling themselves. People are the most surprising thing that exists in the world. And when you invest in business, you invest in people. And if you don't understand that, you should not be making investments. Because the most important element of any investment is the person that you invest in. Whether you're starting one, the partners that you select, the people that you invest in. And frankly, if you don't have an easy time trusting people and investing in people who are just like you, emotional, insecure, change their mind a lot, invest in the stock market or put your money under the mattress. Any questions?
Awesome. Big round of applause for Hannan.